Hello, welcome to the Shelley Show. In the emerging technology space, IoT has made a huge difference. It has not only become a new source of data, but also has opened up new opportunities and has become a key pillar for AI. Today, I have the opportunity to host Elvira Wallis, the global lead for IoT at SAP. She's responsible for ideating, defining, delivering, and taking to market IoT business solutions to increase revenue and adoption. Hi, Elvira.
Hi, Shelley.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing very good. Welcome to the Shelley Show.
Thanks, great. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. So, Elvira, let's start with you. How have you been? Tell us about yourself and your career progression. How have you reached where you are today? And people learn from your experience.
I'm happy to do so. So I am running the Internet of Things business for SAP. I've been doing so since August 2018. And it's a fascinating area because it's so tangible. You know, whomever you speak to and you speak about the Internet of Things, people get it because sensors are part of everybody's daily life. So you can
Mhm.
talk to anybody up and down the street, and they will know what you're talking about when you talk Internet of Things. Although they might not call it Internet of Things. And
Yep.
what else? When I'm not working on the Internet of Things, I'm happy running trails, and I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. Tell us a funny incident that you've encountered during your career, which you thought was very funny and was also professionally associated with IoT, if possible.
Yeah. So one of the ones where it was really funny is in the early days where I was dealing with the Internet of Things. And you know, SAP deals a lot with industrial Internet of Things, and we deal with making the Internet of Things happen for companies, for enterprises. So we're normally used to dealing with machine uptime and how can that be optimized, or business outcomes and so forth. A zoo was approaching us, so a zoo in the sense of an animal zoo, and they
Yep.
talked about the connected elephant, and it was very it is a reasonable thing to do, to basically integrate basically animals and sort of also do assess and monitor animals. It happens a lot in Internet of Things in agriculture, but in the case of the zoo, when they mentioned the connected elephant, I must admit it was a tidbit hard to sort of keep a straight face, because it is so different than what we're normally doing at SAP.
Perfect. I think that was hilarious. Connected elephant. I've heard a lot of connected stuff, connected product, connected vehicles. Connected elephant is new to me
It
for the
was to
morning.
me, believe me.
Okay, so let's discuss about the industry at the present. So, if you look at the IoT industry, where do you think it is at the moment, and how is it embracing IoT as itself?
Hmm. So if you look at technologies, they normally go for a cycle, right? When something is brand
Mhm.
new or perceived to be brand new, it's a hype. Everybody wants to be part of
Yep.
it, and it's sort of
Yep.
a beehive or an animal hill, an ant hill.
Mhm.
Anyway, there are lots of
Mhm.
players. There's sometimes lots of fragmentation, lots of confusion. Everybody wants to be part of it, but people do not necessarily know where they're running to or what they're running for.
Yep.
I think that is sort of where IoT was a couple of years ago. Big hype.
Mhm.
Although the
Yep.
IoT space has been around for many years, but it got hip
Mhm.
again a few years ago. Now I would say that hype is gone. There are other areas of technology that are right now in a hype phase. By the same token, while the hype has vanished, people are starting in earnest to adopt it. People are
Mhm.
starting to look at how can I do Internet of Things scenarios that really make a difference for my business outcome. So gone are the days of
Yep.
let me connect 5 sensors and connect it to a dashboard and just monitor something. Now it is much more about let me do something that makes a difference. So
Yep.
adoption has started in many companies with proof of concepts, but it's now going more into a broader adoption where people wish to see business results. And if you think of somebody like a McKinsey, then they predict that many of these adoption scenarios will be in the business to business area. They say 70% and call it critical that we have data integration. And if you look at something like a Gartner, then they predict that 75% of enterprise generated data by 2025 will be processed outside traditional data centers, which means there's a big trend towards edge computing. So the hype is gone, but adoption is climbing up. It's really taking on.
Okay. You travel across the world, not many countries. So are any countries different in adoption than other countries? How do you see that difference within continents itself? So if you look at APJ or you look at Americas or the European area, which is different and which is more advanced compared to the other?
So I would actually say the difference is more on a company-to-company basis than on a regional level. So for example, of course, in APJ, we see a lot of manufacturing-oriented or industrial Internet of Things-oriented interest and adoption. At the same time, you also see that in Europe, you see that in Central Europe quite a bit. So I wouldn't say it is regionally different how advanced or non-advanced adoption is. It's more a question of company maturity and more a question of trends. Let me give you one example. Right now, we're seeing a big trend of telco companies investigating Internet of Things, and that has to do with the arrival of 5G. With 5G, many telcos are looking at IoT, and that wasn't necessarily the case a couple of years ago.
Okay. At the moment, there are around about 25 people tuned in, so I must thank them for joining us in the morning, because in India it's 10 o'clock and in Australia it's around about I think 2:30. So thank you all for joining us, and please keep asking questions. Okay, Elvira, tell us what SAP is doing in the IoT space to enable intelligent enterprises. So what are we doing? So explain it to the world.
Yeah, happy to do so. So the intelligent enterprise, as the name says, is really about bringing forms of intelligence, just like Internet of Things or AI, to enterprise processes. And what SAP is doing there is really on a number of areas. So for example, it is about embedding Internet of Things capabilities in business processes that are relevant to be associated with Internet of Things. So I give you an example. Kanban has been around for many years. There is an option to IoT enable Kanban, and that can be a process that can be embedded into the intelligent enterprise. Or think of field service management. A field service management person, a technician, which is aware of the usage data of a particular machine, is much better equipped to take the right spare part out to wherever he or she goes to serve a customer. So embedding into a field service process Internet of Things data is a typical example of making the enterprise more intelligent. So it's about embedding Internet of Things capabilities into the business processes of the intelligent core, and it is also, this is very important, about enabling customers to extend business process, because there's no way SAP can pre-think all the business cases or the use cases that could occur at a customer. We can definitely make available the ones that are repetitive, that we see a pattern occurring, but we want to acknowledge that customers are different, right? And many use cases are differentiating in their world, are specific to their world. So we want to make it as easy as possible to extend business processes that they run with Internet of Things capabilities. And the reason why we want to do that is Very simple. In many, many cases, when people pursue Internet of Things capabilities with the intelligent enterprise, it's about extending the value chain. It's about making things visible in their supply chain, for example, that previously were unconnected. And by making these things visible, getting better insight, and the better insight basically being used to create a better business outcome.
Okay. Um, Edge computing. So tell us about how IoT and edge computing work together, because there's a lot of unknown there and people throw these terminologies. So I think it'll be a good idea for you to clarify for the
Yeah.
audience what IoT and edge computing, what importance does it play in the Industry 4.0 area?
Happy to. And edge processing is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and one that we will, if my hypothesis is applicable, that we will hear of quite a bit in the years to come. So think about it. You have more and more data, okay? People want to bring that data into business processes, and people want to very often do so with low latency. So one option would be to bring all the data into the cloud. Now, trouble is that could create quite some cost because rate plans aren't always that cheap, or bringing all the data into the cloud creates a latency you don't want, and sometimes you have intermittent connectivity. And the intermittent connectivity can be wanted or unwanted, right? Sometimes you want to take a manufacturing site off the grid. Sometimes in defense, you want to go off the grid. And sometimes it's just that you're off the grid for connectivity not being there. But in any case, there are good reasons to not bring all the data to the cloud. Some of the data might be just noise. I give you an example. If you have a temperature reading, and the temperature reading is all the time 10 degrees Celsius or 48 degrees Fahrenheit, that's mighty non-interesting. What's really interesting is if you leave that 10 degrees Celsius mark and you go to 10.1, 10.2, and so forth, then you want to sample more and you want to let some business process know about it. So what that means is there is very often by customers a need and a desire to not bring all the data into the cloud, to process the data right there where it occurs. And that processing of data where it occurs, in the broadest terms, is called edge computing. Now,
Sure.
in the SAP world, that means there's a gateway. So a gateway you have, for example, in a retail store, or you have a gateway or many gateways in a factory plant, or you have it in a construction site. And these gateways are provided by quite a number of hardware vendors in this world. And there are a couple of sort of proliferations of it. And when we say edge processing at SAP, that means that we run business processes, could be manufacturing business processes, could be purchasing business processes, could be environment and health and safety processes on that gateway right there where the data occurs. So in the example of a plant, for example, you could have a manufacturing process run on an edge, and the result would be a lot of data gets processed right there in the plant, and not all the data needs to travel into the cloud. That decreases cost. Absolutely. Because you don't need to bring all the data over. And it also means you have very low latency.
Well, actually, as you said it rightly, it's also important to compute some of the part at the edge itself. For example, in a connected vehicle scenario, if you're waiting for the transfer to happen and suddenly there is a person in front of you and the decision needs to be taken and it's waiting for the connection to happen, you can have a scary accident as well at the same time. So I think it is important to have edge computing run in its simplest terms.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about.
Oh, go ahead.
Go. Keep going. Sorry.
There's an example of a customer that we have in Dubai, and in Dubai you have some really, really large construction sites. And if you think construction sites, right, you need to think cranes, big, large cranes. And if you think of a construction site with many cranes, it is impossible to assume that the crane first calls the cloud and says, "May I turn?" right? By that time, you might
Yep.
have already a really ugly collision. So the crane needs to be an autonomous unit, which can decide there and then on the spot of the construction site whether it can turn or whether it would get too close to a neighboring crane. And that's a perfect example of the need of, that illustrates the need of edge computing.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Challenges. So, what are the kind of challenges that you see in the market at the moment in terms of adoption? So, and is it making any progress? As you said, that now it's moved on from being a hype to being utilized at various industries. So,
Mhm.
so what are the key challenges that you see in the industry at the moment?
Key challenges. So let me turn it around, if I may, Shaylee. And that is, when are people successful, right? Which is the opposite
Mhm.
of how do I overcome the challenges, right? People are
Yep.
successful if they have in projects an executive sponsor who really sort of
Mhm.
carries the torch and sort of is also a door opener. That's one criteria for success. Or otherwise, if you turn it around, one of the challenges is if you have some innovation department or some IT department
Mhm.
tampering, playing with IoT, but nobody's sponsoring it, especially if nobody's sponsoring it on the business side. So a business sponsor is needed. The other thing that is absolutely one of the challenges is to find a use case that is tangible enough that you can explain it to a large audience. If you want to get buy-in inside a company, you need to be able to explain well and in simple terms what it is doing. And the other challenge is, and there are several studies that show that now, if within a company you do one or two IoT cases, the ROI, the return of
Mhm.
investment, is not necessarily as big as people wanted. Now, the opposite is, the more use cases people apply, the bigger the return of investment per use case. And why is that so? There's
Yep.
some what I would call, initial upfront investment that applies across the board. And it applies whether you have 1 or 5 or 10 use cases that you get ready.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, if
Yep.
you just do one use case, lots of effort, return
Mhm.
not so big. If you do 5 use cases, not 5 times the effort, right? Much less than 5 times the effort. And so the return
Sure.
gets larger the wider you go. The recommendation I would make to people is to take a use case, time box it, take something that's low hanging fruit, something that is tangible, and start with it, find a business sponsor, and then make sure to have a game plan how to broaden it. Because otherwise there's a challenge to get stuck in sort of the, playful innovators corner that doesn't see sort of enterprise maturity.
Sure. That's quite interesting. And I usually say nothing succeeds like success. So if you have a little project that is successful, everyone will come to you and ask you about, how did you do it? Can you work in my particular department and so forth? And I've mentioned that in the past long number of times in all the episodes. And you're absolutely right. In emerging technologies, nothing succeeds like success. Okay, let's talk about the future. So where is all this heading towards? Where is it all going?
Where's it all going? One of my bets would be we see a huge increase in edge computing. A lot of stuff that's real time will more and more pivot towards the edge. The edges are becoming much more powerful in terms of compute power. It's quite amazing what you can see these days in terms of compute power at the edge. And also, edge processing becomes ever more sophisticated. So one thing I predict is we're going to see a lot more edge computing. Still, nonetheless, people will aggregate across edge nodes in the cloud and compare between edge 1 and edge 2. So plant 1 and plant B, production line 1 and production line 2, work center 1 and work center 2. So the advent of edge doesn't mean we see the cloud go away. The two belong together. They're like yin and yang, right? So that's one thing that we see. And I strongly believe the Internet of Things will become part of everyday life. Now, where SAP, of course, plays is very much in the realm of industrial IoT. And I've learned my lesson. Industrial IoT has a different name in every country, right? In Europe, we call it very often, or in Germany, Industry 4.0. In Asia, I've seen many initiatives called so-and-so country 2025 or 2030. But we see this digital transformation everywhere under a different name. So it's ubiquitous. We will see it everywhere.
Perfect. I must say one thing, Elvira. This episode is being really, really popular because I've just hit 40 viewers at the same time. Usually we see 2025, we've hit 40. So we've just almost doubled it. So I think people are interested in IoT and what SAP has to offer as well. And there are a few questions. But before we get to the question, any exciting use case that you think you would like to discuss and share with the audience, which you think was absolutely one of the best and wowed you away, in other words?
So here's one that I really, really like because people sort of meet it every day. Have you ever ordered anything on the internet online and had it sent to your home?
Yes, just did today morning.
So it normally comes in a package, doesn't it? I mean, it's not delivered by the mail person without a package, isn't it?
Yes.
Have you ever wondered how the packaging gets around the thing you've ordered?
No.
Yeah, see, here's the Internet of Things for you. There are actually a lot of companies in this world which produce packaging machines, right? And you're thinking,
Yep.
packaging machines. So there's a trend in the economy called packaging as a service. So instead of renting the machine, you actually rent the service of packaging. Now think of the holiday season, which is about to come. The idea that is sort of more and more gaining ground in the market is, instead of being frantic about the holiday season, to think of it as a huge packaging opportunity and to basically sell lots of packaging as a service. And what I really, really appreciate is one use case where SAP is helping one packaging provider, which basically does the packaging for one of the companies in the world which produces most of the online traffic in this world, have all the time the packaging material where it needs to be, when it needs to be, never run out of it, and have maximum machine uptime. If you think about it, these packaging machines stand in remote fulfillment centers. Heaven forbid it goes down. The field service technician drives there for hours, and heaven forbid the poor person didn't have a proper information about what spare part is needed. So a use case I really like, and people can absolutely relate to it, is when I say, hey, you know that the Internet of Things is with you every day when you get one of these online packages, because chances are very high that the machine which packaged that package was actually using SAP's Internet of Things capabilities, in that we make sure machine uptime is high, we have the usage data, it gets serviced only when it needs to be serviced and not just because it should be serviced according to some schedule. And when the field service technician goes out there, the person has the right spare part along, can also service the other machines there, which have a lot of uptime. So it's a very, very tangible case, and that's why I like it. So next time you open a package from that company where you all order online, think of it, the Internet of Things is in your hands.
And think SAP.
And think SAP.
Okay. Now I've got I've got 4 questions in front of me from LinkedIn, and I've got a couple from Facebook. So let's quickly shoot at questions, and I'll go with this question, which has come from Malia Ahmed, and she's from Australia, and she's written as a question saying, "Where is Australia with the IoT movement? Is it a priority for us here at the moment or not?"
Actually, we have interest from Australia, definitely. Think mining, for example, that's a big one. If you think edge computing specifically. Also, when you think of defense, very often defense is very big on edge computing, because in this case, it's non-wanted connectivity. You want to go offline when you feel it's appropriate. So we clearly see that in Australia. It's actually just up there, like many other countries in Asia, with IoT adoption.
Okay, another question from Sunil Tilway, and he says, what are the emerging technologies in the next year, 2020?
What are the emerging technologies in the year 2020? I would say 5G is going to make steps forward. Not that we see it going completely mainstream. There are regional differences when it comes to 5G, but that is one of the ones I keep my eyes out in 2020. And of course, more and more edge computing. That's where I would put a large bet on.
Okay. There is a question on Facebook where it is asked from Ijaz Ullah. He says, can you tell a little bit about elasticity and how SAP handles it? And I asked him to clarify this, and he said this. He said, how do you scale according to the computation of the workload and how they predict it?
Okay, couple of questions. My first one is, yes, elasticity matters. Having said that, one thing I would people encourage to think about before they think elasticity, in particular, in general terms, if you think of edge computing, for example, the elasticity comes also whether you want a constrained footprint at the edge, which some people want. They want it kind of like as small as a Raspberry Pi. Think of, for example, edge computing running on a sailboat, which is a use case we've done. So you want it as small as possible. That's different than, say, in a manufacturing plant where you want an elastic edge. The elasticity is part of the design. The elasticity, in our experience, is also much more needed at the more the Internet of Things project advances. When people look at larger amounts of data, want to mine it, and so forth. It needs to be part of the design. That's, I think, my roundabout answer to such a wide question.
Okay. Another question from Ijaz himself was, how much resources are needed or will be needed, kind of thing. And I think it's an open-ended question. So
let me give you an example. We once
Mhm.
did an Internet of Things scenario with a racing sailboat, and we did it, although it doesn't sound like SAP, because we wanted to prove the point that SAP can be small, nimble, and very fast. And there we ran on a form factor as small as a Raspberry Pi. But of course, that's not an industrial Internet of Things scenario. If you go Industry 4.0 industrial Internet of Things, then you will need something with a bigger footprint. But it also depends on, what rules you apply, what logic you apply, and how much data retention you have and what kind of data you retain. If you retain all the, excuse me to say it that way, noisy data, which is non-interesting, your footprint will be much larger.
Sure. Okay. I think we are on the top of the hour. Thank you very much, Elvira. Really appreciate you. And as I said, this has been one of the most popular episodes so far. We've hit at the top, we've hit around about 45 people viewing at the same time, which is being great. And I think there's a lot of interest on IoT from the wider audience. So thank you very much. And I know it's late evening for you, and thank you for taking time on a Sunday. And thank you very much. And I'll speak to you later.
Thank you, Shelley, and thanks for the audience, for watching and tuning in. Very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
So, guys, that was Elvira, and I would like to thank all of you for being part of this. Please, I'll be getting another guest next week, so please tune into the Shelley Show. And here we are. Thank you very much for this episode. Bye now.